Hello and welcome to So Very Wrong About Games. I'm your co-host, a man with a face for radio and a voice for blogging, Mark Bigney. With me as always is a man whose sheer animal magnetism has beguiled everything from humans to hummingbirds, my co-host, Michael Walker. How you doing, Walker?
Always good, Mark.
I'm glad to hear that. So today we're going to do what we always do. We're going to talk about games we played. We're going to talk a little bit more about our feature game. We're going to talk a little bit about news and why it doesn't matter. And the primary topic of today's podcast, we're going to be talking about randomness and how to deal with it, how to be grown-ups in the face of dice telling you that you're stupid and ugly and no one likes you. So first off, in terms of games we played, what's the first game you want to talk about, Walker?
Well, Champions of Midgard. It's an older game, but all the new expansions just got here with the Kickstarter, and we've played it twice this week, and I thought they did a great job with the new expansions and all the cool Viking meeples. And it took an old game and brought it back to the table, so that's always good.
Is there anything radically new, or is it just nuanced stuff?
Nuanced stuff, like more stuff to fight, more journeys to go on to, and something to give you a direction in the game. Like they have 3 main objectives, and you have to, and gives you a reason to get your guys killed. Like every time your dice die, you get tokens, and you put those tokens towards your main objective type thing. So,
would you think that these expansions are sufficiently accessible that new players can jump right in, or is this just for?
Yeah, for sure. I think you can introduce them right off the hop. You don't need to do the base game and then say, okay, now we're going to add expansions. You can just throw the expansions in right off the beginning. I think they're that easy to incorporate.
Yeah, some games, I love the expansions, but it's just a little bit too much for new players, and that's always awkward.
That's right, and you always have new players, so it's impossible to get those expansions to the table because you're always saying, okay, well, we have new people, so we're just going to play the base game again.
Yeah, I hate noobs, too. Noobs are terrible. They're ruining the hobby. I think we should ban them all.
Exactly.
Well, the first game I'd like to talk about is, you've played this game once, Walker. It's Sidereal Confluence, Trading and Negotiation in the Elysian Quadrant, which definitely, based on the look of your face, I think the title of the game warrants it. When I played it, it was called Trade Empires, and that's still what I call it, and what I'll always call it in my heart of hearts. The street name is simply Sidereal Confluence, but even that's pretty awful. No offense to the designer. It was released this year. It's by Tau City Dykeman, who's designed a brilliant game. It's a trading game with heavy asymmetry. And I personally thought, Walker, like I think you are, that I was done with taking cubes and turning them into other cubes so I could get more cubes, and then at the end of it would get points. In fact, I played Century Spice Road, and I hated it. Couldn't stand it, because I'm done with cubes into other cubes. But it's just the asymmetry and the trading really gets me. Sidereal Confluence is a brilliant game. I've been playing the crap out of it lately, and almost everybody likes it, except for the esteemed man sitting across from me.
It's a great game. Like I said, it is a great game, but it's one of those games that you'll definitely get better the more you play it. And knowing which cards are coming out is definitely going to help the players that know the game.
I insist that I'm going to convert you. I think midway through your second game, you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be saying, Mark, I apologize. I was incredibly wrong about this. Because you just gotta. One of the things that's striking about it is there's so much information to parse. It really is better for those kinds of gamers that are able to look at a sea of information and say, okay, I'm going to have to choose to ignore this part of it because otherwise I'm going to drive myself crazy. Or for those kinds of people who look at a sea like that and say, no, I must solve every detail. But for people in the middle, the people who I want an information space that's not too big, and then it might drive them crazy because the information spaces can get reasonably big. I'm just really good at being dumb and saying, I'm going to ignore all this crap because I'm not smart enough.
That's right. Concentrate on your machine and this part of your machine and get it done.
Yeah, exactly. What's next for you, Walker?
Next for me is the New Orleans co-op expansion. So if you're on the fence about trying it or buying it, I would say go for it. I played it 4 times this week. We only played it 2-player, but it's fantastic. It goes right down to the last turn. It was a 50-50 win ratio, and every time it was down to we needed one more turn or we won on the last turn. So I give it 2 thumbs up. Which
modes have you tried?
Just the invasion.
I see.
Out of that expansion. We haven't done the Carpenter or any of the solo stuff in there.
Oh, I see. So there's only one
Correct.
Co-op mode, multiplayer? I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah, I might have to give Orléans another try with that in mind. No, I'm sorry. Walker, viewers at home, Walker's sneering at me. This is prejudice against my French-Canadian ancestry. He's just bitter that he can barely speak one language as opposed to me who can't speak 2.
It's true. I am going back to learn Latin. Because I too want to learn another language.
He meant to say another dead language. He's been ragging me on this for quite some time. Well, the next game I've been trying lately. This is something that we've been doing together. This is Warhammer Underworld's Shadespire, the latest offering by Games Workshop. This is their attempt to break into the sort of competitive, accessible skirmish market, kind of roughly in the same design space as I'd say X-Wing-ish, in the sense of, you can pick up and play, and, and you've got all your stuff.
You get your army pre-made, and you get to the table, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. I got to say that I'm completely blown away at how good this design is. I don't think it's brilliant by any stretch of the imagination, but I've had dalliances with some of Games Workshop non-core products for decades now, really. And this is by far the most accessible, clean. There's lots of clever little design elements, and that's not normally something I associate with Games Workshop outside of Space Hulk. Aside from Space Hulk, everything has been, when it's fun, it's rarely been clever. And just the way the activation system works, the way the movement system works, the way you can figure out, okay, this guy can't move anymore, so there I can push for this objective, and the way it works with the card play, I've really been impressed. I don't know about you, Walker.
For sure. The number of mechanisms that are brought together in this game is pretty amazing, especially for Games Workshop.
Yeah, there are now 4 total warbands, the 2 that come in the core box, and the 2 other ones, I've tried them all. They've all been really interestingly different as well. So I really can't wait to see where the game goes, and I hope that there's a sort of vibrant competitive scene that develops around it, the way other games do, because quite frankly, the other games in its ilk, like whether it's the more accessible skirmish type minis games like X-Wing, like Armada, not nearly as much to my taste. And so if this takes off, I'll be very, very pleased.
Yeah, the sculpts are amazing too. The only thing that'll differentiate from the other ones is that it's not going to be pre-painted, so.
Yeah.
Take away from that what you will.
That is true. Next up, Walker?
The last one I've got is what we played together, and that is Keeper, the new thing from the...
Richard Brees,
and his Keyflower series. And I was also blown away by this one. I've never had a problem with any of those games, especially Keyflower. I think it is an amazing game, and Keeper lives up to that reputation, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I was less sold on it, to be honest. Partially because this is a bit of an unfair comparison, because of its similarity to Keyflower. Keyflower, you get the tiles, you build the tiles, you upgrade the tiles, you get your point engine tiles, you get your economy tiles and stuff like that. But the thing that blows me away primarily about Keyflower is just the way the auction mechanism works at the same time as the worker placement, and how I can go to your board and activate some of your stuff, and it was that level of interaction. The primary element of interaction with Keeper, which is a sort of joining mechanism, I thought it was okay, but it didn't really grab me. So at the end of the day, if you're going to ask me to sit down for 90 to 120 minutes of sort of Euro tile placement building, I'll probably go back to Keyflower, honestly. But I respect the fact that Brees knows what he's doing. It's certainly clean and pleasant. I didn't dislike the game. I don't think I was quite enthused about it as you were.
Sure, but the joint player boards blew me away. Like how they're like a puzzle Rubik's cube. Right out from the Hellraiser movie. If you hit the wrong combination, you're going to be in some trouble.
That is true. You did love those folding boards. The last game I want to talk about quickly is Immortals, again published this year by Dirk Henn and Mike Elliott. This is sort of the third game in basically the same bones that were established in Wallenstein in 2002 and in Shogun in 2006. And I'm not sure whether Henn had much to do with this iteration. I don't know if they just handed the design to Elliott and said, make Shogun and Wallenstein your own. Elliott's the guy who did Thunderstone, for what it's worth, and he's done some other work. And this is sort of a generic fantasy version of Shogun and Wallenstein, and it has the infamous Cube Tower. I love that Cube Tower. And I really liked Immortals. Every change that it did to the Shogun Wallenstein engine I liked. Combat was slightly more dynamic. You had a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you're going to plan your actions. Armies don't really die. They just go somewhere else. And so managing where your armies are, that's why the game is called what it is. But at the end of the day, it basically showed to me that the core element that I don't like about the Shogun Wallenstein engine, namely that it's a little too static and a little too long, even if you make it a little bit more dynamic, I still find it just a tad too static and a tad too long. I've been spoiled by games where the movement options really open up the breadth of play. Things like Senji, things like Kemet,
Scythe,
things like that. Absolutely, where you never really feel like you're trapped in one little corner of the board, and then suddenly player A says, "Oh, player B is winning. Who's going to stop them?" And you look at the board and shrug and say, "I can't reach them ever." So that's that. And, in other words, this is the same sort of multiplayer conflict game problems since the dawn of time. That having been said, as I say, Immortals is slightly better than Shogun and Wallenstein at that, but still. And it's reliably in excess of 2 hours, which for me is the unforgivable sin. If this game system had an iteration that was like 90 minutes, it might be my favorite game.
Yeah, for sure. But the where you get the two different races and merge them together, and the fact that, like you said, it took everything that was good from those two games and just improved that and took out everything that was bad. But like you said, it is too long.
Yeah.
And for what you get.
Yeah. So I really liked it, but it was just shy of greatness for me, and sometimes that's even more frustrating than a terrible game. But that's basically where I ended up on it. Enjoyed all my playings, but when we're rounding about the 90 to 120 minute version, I start checking my watch and figuring, okay, this is kind of a foregone conclusion. Let's call it a day.
That's right.
Well, with that having been said, a sort of executive summary on what we've been playing, why don't you introduce our feature game to us, Walker?
Our feature game this week is Kingdom Death Monster.
Never heard of it. Massive
Kickstarter. It's going to make this discussion kind of awkward then if you've never heard about it. Maybe it'll be one-sided. That means everyone could just listen to what I have to say, and it'll give everyone a break. So I suppose that is a good thing.
You have my sympathies.
It is a massive role-playing, dice-chucking, dungeon-crawling death fest.
Well, let's call it what it is. It's Warhammer Quest.
It is Warhammer Quest.
I mean, I don't mean that disparagingly. Like, it's very much in the same mold as Warhammer Quest. I don't mean to say that everything that it does was done previously in Warhammer Quest. Quite the opposite. Kingdom Death Monster has a number of improvements on the genre, but it is very much a sort of... it's a genre of game that I call fun paperwork. It's like you spend a lot of time doing fun paperwork, very much like a role-playing game. Now, you don't do any role-playing in Kingdom Death Monster, and good thing you don't, because otherwise at the start of each session you have to tear off all your clothes and go stark raving mad.
Yes.
At the beginning. But yeah, I mean, just for some context, you said it was a massive Kickstarter hit way back in the halcyon days of 2012, back when kickstarting board games wasn't, arguably the dominant form of distribution for everything outside Asmodee. It raised over $2 million, and that was an unheard of sum at the time. And I pledged not knowing what I was getting myself into, to be honest. I gave them in $350 in 2012, and then 3 years later, $1,500 worth of retail material got shipped to my door. No one really knew what was going on. Certainly not at all the creator. The creator took a bath on this originally. He just went nuts. I mean, he went crazy in a way that some of those projects do. But man, what came out the other end?
It's so true. And that 2 million figure is only the initial Kickstarter, never mind how much people added on after the fact as well.
Yeah. Well, there was the 1.5 upgrade Kickstarter that also raised millions of bucks.
That's right.
He can't keep the base game in stock. I mean, I paid... I actually looked up at the original Kickstarter. I paid $85 for that core game in 2012. And now it's selling... he just keeps increasing the price, but he still can't keep it in stock. And there's just so much crap stuffed into that box. It's madness. It really is madness. So let's talk about the actual game.
I was about to say, well, why don't we tell people what Kingdom Death Monster is before we go too far?
Yeah, so it's a game where you basically control the fate of a settlement of what are called survivors in this nightmarish hellscape, where they're routinely attacked by... well, all manner of things. The base game involves... The initial encounter involves a freakishly deformed white lion. But honestly, to say much more than that would kind of spoil a lot of the surprises that the game has in store. Different monsters and different adversaries get introduced, but in this piecemeal kind of way. The story, such as it is, there isn't much of a story, more on that later, unfolds very gradually. But at the start, you're hunting this lion with nothing but mostly naked survivors with jagged bits of stone. And that very much sort of sets the world up. There are these terrifying forces beyond your control or comprehension. And you're behind the eight ball right from the beginning.
That's right. You drop down into this pit with no memory, and you wake up beside these people you don't know, and something's attacking you. Welcome to Kingdom Death Monster.
Precisely.
And so I was going to compare it to mostly other dungeon crawlers like Descent and or Gloomhaven or Imperial Assault, which are the three big ones I would consider at this particular